Good afternoon. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, students. A very warm welcome this afternoon to the first in a series of institutional engagements that we're going to have on academic renewal at Stellenbosch University. My name is Deresh Ramujernath. I'm the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Learning and Teaching. And colleagues, I think you're all aware that our rectorate and our institution about 12 to 18 months ago took a decision that we're going to have these game changes for the institution. We know that this institution has a tremendous reputation, and that reputation has been built over a number of years, and especially with regards to learning and teaching at the institution. We have decided that we don't want to just maintain that reputation, but we want to enhance the reputation of the institution with regards to learning and teaching. And so though they came up with the idea of the game changes, and at the time when the game changes were announced, there were 4 game changes that were related to learning and teaching. The first one was called program renewal. It was then reimagining assessments. It was hybrid learning. And then it was about innovation on entrepreneurship in terms of learning and teaching. And then as we evolved, we decided to group the learning and teaching game changes into a single game changer, which is now known as academic renewal. And academic renewal has a number of components that make it up. And I think one of the things that you would have heard about, hopefully in your faculty boards, hopefully your faculties and your deans and your vice deans have been feeding back in terms of information with regards to academic renewal, is that there will be a concept document that we will produce as an institution that will lay out the framework for what we see as academic renewal at Stellenbosch University. And in that framework document, you would see that there are components. And the first component that we're going to be dealing with this afternoon is student success. The other components are going to be around program renewal, around assessments, around graduate attributes, hybrid learning, and the continuum of academic offerings that we have as an institution. In deciding on academic renewal at Stellenbosch University, the rectorate looked at what is going on globally in terms of trends at universities and higher education institutions. And there was a study that was done by the World Economic Forum and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And they found that there's 8 broad areas in which universities and higher education institutions are currently kind of moving forward on with regards to learning and teaching. The first is on immersive learning experiences, and I think we all know that during COVID, as an institution, we were forced to do that in terms of pivoting to online and to hybrid learning. The second is on blending of traditional and non-traditional teaching methods, which then becomes a norm, and that's kind of combining the co-curriculum and the extracurricular activities and offerings as part of the formal curriculum of the institution. The third is around moving between borders and gaining an international outlook. That speaks to our internationalization agenda at Stellenbosch University with regards to learning and teaching, as well as looking at joint programs that we can offer. The fourth broad area is on student-focused learning. It's really about how we tailor our teaching and learning from a flexibility point of view for the student. Then it's about learning from everywhere. I think we learned that as well during COVID, and hopefully those practices are continuing into the future at the institution, replacing the formal lectures that we normally have with active learning. The seventh is about developing the kind of competencies, the skill sets, and the graduate attributes that are required for the world of work and the jobs of the future. And the 8th was around using formative instead of high-stakes examinations. And that speaks to what we're looking at in terms of the assessments as well and reimagining assessments. Now, Stellenbosch University, as I've mentioned, has a tremendous reputation, an institution which has one of the highest student success rates in the country. But we know that when you start to disaggregate that student success rate, depending on the demographic groups, whether the students are in residence or whether they're commuting, also according to race demographics, you find disparities in student success within the institution. So under student success, we want to get a better understanding as an institution as to how we enhance student success in an equitable way across all of the demographic groups that we have within the institution. So today's engagement will focus on student success. It's known that student success has been a preoccupation in the higher education sector for almost 2 decades, even though I have to say at our institution we haven't really looked at it as deep as other institutions have looked at it over the last 2 decades. And it's really with regards to looking at the relationship between access into the higher education system and the disproportionate number of graduates that are coming out. So it's a number going into the system and the numbers that are graduating out of the system. And we know it's affected by things like the socioeconomic status, whether they are first-time, first-generation students, and it has a disproportionate impact in terms of students' performance at university. So this afternoon, I am very pleased to have 2 of our eminent colleagues in learning and teaching that will be giving some presentations on student success from the work that they've undertaken at their institutions, but also work that they've undertaken nationally in this regard. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Prof Bala Pillay and Professor Francois Strydom. And Bala and Francois have been working on the issue of student success for quite a while, and both have national as well as institutional perspectives on this particular issue. Prof Bala Pillay is a scientist in the field of microbiology. He's currently an emeritus professor at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and I had the pleasure when I was at University of KwaZulu-Natal to work very closely with Bala on the executive of the institution. And so he served as the DVC for Teaching and Learning. He's also served as the Dean for Teaching and Learning in the College of Agriculture, Science and Engineering. And he's been involved with the US-based Kresge Foundation that has been supporting institutions to develop a strategy for student success for the last decade and a half. Professor Francois Strydom is currently the Senior Director at the Center for Teaching and Learning at the University of Free State. He has been the project leader of the South African surveys of student engagement since 2007. And that particular project has been sponsored by the Kresge Foundation and has been used by 20 of the public higher education institutions in Southern Africa. That report has influenced national quality assurance policy and practices and is a key component of the Siya Phumelele We Succeed network focused on improving student success in higher education through the use of data analytics. And his research interests include student engagement and success, improving the quality of teaching and learning, and evidence-based change in the higher education and employability. So in terms of the program this afternoon, Bala will be giving us his perspectives, followed by Francois. We will then open the floor for discussion and for questions. And thereafter, Dr. Liz Langer will do a summing up in terms of the discussion over the course of the afternoon, and we'll thereafter have a closing. We also have colleagues that are joining us online, and I think we may also, through the chat box, be able to receive some questions from colleagues online. And I know that Dr. Antoinette van Minerva has told me that she's also recording this particular session, so that will be available post the event on our university website. So it gives me great pleasure and honor now to ask Bala to come up. Bala, we look forward to your presentation on student success and the tremendous work that's been done with the Kresge Foundation.
Thank you, Deresh. Can I get my presentation? I don't. Okay, it's here. There we go. There we go. Okay. Good afternoon, colleagues, and I thank the university and Deresh and his team for inviting me and for you to brave the weather. Thank you for coming. So Deresh has given you the background to the series of lectures they plan to do, and a bit of my background. And what Francois and I are hoping to do today is to stimulate discussion on student success, which is a very, very important challenge in South Africa and many parts of the world. And what I'm going to do is talk about the Siyaphumelela project, but at the same time, I want to introduce to you all the issues that we've come across over the past years. And I think it's important to share this so that we learn from other experiences. We don't have to reinvent the wheel completely from scratch, and also to stimulate discussion on how can we improve student success. You can talk about student success, undergraduate performance. Some universities claim they've done very well, 85% pass rate, national average. Some do better than that, including Stellenbosch. The point is the minimum time to completion, to graduation, those numbers are really not impressive. And that is a challenge. It's a challenge, and it impacts greatly on the student, the institution, the country, the economy. There's impaction in the system. There's no throughput of students. New students cannot come in. Okay? It puts a lot of stress on staff, on your resources, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, you know, there's no need to motivate why we need to improve student success. It's very important. Okay? The Siyaphumelela project started in 2014, funded mainly by the Kresge Foundation. At that time, there were 5 institutions that came on board: Free State, WITS, Nelson Mandela University, DUT, and the other one from Pretoria. They came on board, and then the past 6 years, there were another batch of universities came on board, and I think in total there were about 18 universities of the 26 in South Africa that joined. And now the good news is it's been extended for a further 3 years, starting 1 July 24, and there will be a total of 20 universities in total to come on board. The University of Stellenbosch was not part of that. Hopefully they'll come on board. So we're here to share our experiences. I'm talking about coaching because I am a coach. I'm a professor emeritus at UKZN, but I'm a coach with this project, Siyaphumelela, which means we succeed. And this program or project involves coaching. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but as we speak about coaching, you will get a better understanding of what we do. So let me go on. I've started talking about the importance of improving student success. Now, coaching. Coaching is something which was also new to me some 5 years ago. It's a new concept for many people. And what does a coach do? The coach assists universities by nudging, by being a friend, by really interacting with institutions. The approach is one that's human-centric, where we have higher education experts external to the university who serve as respectful, critical friends with sensitivity for people and their complex environments. So we're nothing like Pep Guardiola or any of the other coaches. We cannot run this the way they do. We've got to understand that we're coming in from the outside. We cannot tell the institution what to do. However, we can nudge, we can talk about things, we can have discussions. There's got to be trust. It's very important. Got to be trust. It's generative. We're learning together in the context of each university's unique problems and a global knowledge base. So while we're all South African universities, there are differences. We all have differences, and we need to understand that. But we learn together in a common goal, and it's transformative. Many universities are talking about transformation, including Stellenbosch. But we're using evidence-based or database change to promote transformation. It's not about your perception. What is your perception? You can talk about many, many universities in this country and outside the country. There are many perceptions about we are doing very well, we are doing this and we are doing that. The bottom line is, do you have the evidence to support that? And I think this is what this project is about, Siphumelele, is about evidence-based transformation at scale. It doesn't help to look at 10 students or 20 students, in a cohort of 50,000, 30,000. You want to do it at scale, okay? But it's got to be evidence-based, and that's critical. I'm just going to quickly go over this. This is the logic model for Siphumelele student success coaching, and it talks about the inputs. I'm not sure if is there a pointer? But basically, we've got inputs, outputs, outcomes, and so I'm just going to go through this very quickly. So we're looking at the resources, the activities, who are the beneficiaries, whether it's short-term, medium-term, or long-term. Obviously, you want to look at the finances. The Kresge Foundation is the main provider. Okay, there we go. Thank you. So finances come from the Kresge Foundation and any other fees the institution may have. The activities, advertising and awarding of grants, supporting program administration, funding, etc. The beneficiaries, South African partner and participant universities and their students. And then you get a long-term benefit to the universities. The program is administered by SADI. SADI is the organization that administers this program in South Africa. They draw up memorandums of agreements or understandings with the universities. They arrange convenings, conferences, workshops, ICAT, I'll talk about that shortly, and they monitor and evaluate programs, and they provide resources such as the Siphumelele website, data dictionary, working group, etc. The beneficiaries are the university executive and leads and coaches. And the short term, we do things like know your data workshops, administer ICAT. ICAT is institutional capacity assessment tool. It's an online tool which gives universities the opportunity to look at themselves, to introspect. The entire university comes on board and they offer what the views are of the institution. And that's a very, very good tool to get a very good broad overview of what's going on at the university. The outcomes, impacts, the universities deepen the knowledge of the data which can be used to promote student success and share the promising or established practices with the network. So it's important we're working with Siphumelele as a network. I mentioned that 18 universities, they're a part of this, and they've been sharing quite a lot. So whatever your strengths are, whatever your successes are, you share it as a network. And in the process, you learn to do things better. You learn from each other's mistakes, you learn from each other's successes. Okay? Long-term universities use data to improve student retention, progress, and success. This word, the silo mentality, across universities has become permeable. Okay? We always talk about this, and it's very important to understand that for student success, I'm going to repeat this, for student success, every stakeholder at the university, be it the academic member of staff, support staff, professional staff, finance, administration, the cleaner, gardener, everybody comes on board, including students, to work together for student success. And that's been one of the things that we've noticed, is that this cohesion, this synergistic effect does not exist. It exists in pockets, okay? For obvious reasons. The universities were not designed for today's students. The universities evolved from being very elitist to where it is today. But the university's been basically patching up and fixing the problem. We didn't have the opportunity to, if you were to build a university today, what would it look like? It certainly wouldn't look like what we have today. So I think it's an important thing to understand that if we want to talk about student success, we need to look at working together. And that is really important, very, very important. Often somebody would say, well, it's not my responsibility, it's your responsibility, it's your responsibility. And we're looking the other way. But collectively, it is our responsibility. So just to finish this model here, the coaches are important in this model, and they build relationship with the executive, with the leads. Each university in this project has got a lead person who really communicates with Sia Pumelela from the institution. And there's workshops, meetings, convenings, facilitation, ICAT again, the beneficiaries, university, executive, student success committee, etc. Short-term, medium-term, I'm going to go through this a bit quicker, and long-term benefits to the university, to the students. The coaches have ongoing mentoring. Even at my age, I'm still undergoing training. So it's something we learn all the time. We are fortunate to have the support of the Achieving the Dream Network in the United States. You may have heard of the Achieving the Dream Network. There's over 300 institutions that are part of that network. They focus a lot on student success. And there's also an institutional innovation alliance, University Innovation Alliance of 17 reputable universities in the US that's also part of this network. And they have realized that it's very important to work collaboratively. And in doing so, this Innovation Alliance of these 17 universities, they've made tremendous progress in student success. They work a lot with the Pell students in the US. The Pell students are students who are really in need of financial help because of the socio-economic situation. And they found that they improved the success, graduation success, in a few years by 21%. 21% is phenomenal, profound. And the one thing that all institutions need to understand is that if you improve your graduation completion time, your income goes up significantly. So.
If you say 21%, does it mean it was 60 and now it's 81? Or is it 21% more students learning?
21% more. Okay. I don't know the exact number, but it was 20%. But the point I'm making is that when we talk about improving student success, one of the outstanding institutions is Georgia State. And they have what we call real-time monitoring of students' progress, where they identify students immediately they have a problem of being at risk. So they've put in place, at a tremendous cost, this facility where every student is monitored throughout the year, not at the end of the year when they fail, but during the year. They pick up the problems. The next day, the student is called in by the team. Can we help you? What is your problem? And they have made tremendous progress with student success. But when they do the maths, they find that this success pays for the input of their finances that they've committed to. So really, it's a win-win situation. Okay, so let me move on. So what I'm trying to do is to give you an idea of the generic aims and practices of coaching in Siya Phumelela, the knowledge gained and generated by coaches within the project currently, and share some highlights and successes of coaching within the network and the emerging impact for the beneficiaries. Okay, so what are the generic aims and practices of coaching in Siya Phumelela? What did the coaches learn from the institutions that they worked with? So these are all the 18 universities in South Africa. How did the coach help the institution learn about using evidence for student success? So each coach is assigned to 2 or 3 universities, and they work with the universities within the program. What were the challenges that the coaches encountered? Do they still exist? And what were some of the successes of the coaching in the context of Siya Phumelela? So this will really address issues that are common to all institutions, including Stellenbosch. Okay, so the first one, what are the generic aims and practices of coaching in Siya Phumelela? So the next few slides will talk about the generic aims. Okay, so the coach first signs a memorandum of understanding with the Kresge Foundation through SAIDI, and the coaches are expected to participate in professional development activities, for example, workshops, Achieving the Dream Network, conferences, and training. Each coach will visit the institution that they assign to at least 3 times a year, which is 3 full working days as a minimum. Okay, but we found out that we need to spend far more than 3 days in order to achieve what we want to achieve. What do? We introduce Siya Phumelela to the institution. We meet the executive. It's very important that the executive come on board. Unless the executive show intent and commitment, the institution does not really come on board. So it's very, very important. We meet the Student Success Committee. Now this may be foreign to some people, but the institutions that are part of the Siya Phumelela project are expected to form a Student Success Committee or equivalent. It's a committee that is representative of all stakeholders that are important in student success. So you'd have students on board, you'd have the executive, you'd have academics, you have the support team, you have the professional team, etc. And they are part of the Student Success Committee, including people involved with institutional research, people doing work on data, okay? They're all part of this committee. And we help identify at-risk modules, help integrate data analytics. This is an important part here. We find that they call them high-impact modules or killer modules. You find this is where, when you have a very good undergraduate success rate of students of 85 and 90, but you find that they don't complete the degree. And it's because of these high-risk modules, the modules that they don't pass within a program. And one of the activities within Siya Phumelela is for the institutions within that program to identify these modules, then look at interventions to alleviate that burden on the students. Why are the students failing? We can go into a lot of detail about those things, but the important thing is identify the modules and put in interventions to really avoid a lot of students failing and passing all the other modules in that program. Okay? And then to help integrate data analytics. This is important. Many universities submit data, HEMIS data. It's an obligation that they have to submit. But when you look at the data and try and understand what that means, not all stakeholders, very few people look at the data and understand what's going on. Okay? And it's important to share your data with all stakeholders so that everybody can see a story, they can see a picture. They don't have to really become specialists in data analytics, but they must be able to understand what is this data about. And that's very, very important. So what we're looking at, the coaches are really there to facilitate this, okay? And I want to just stress, we're not there to tell the institution what to do. We are there to nudge, we are there to advise and talk about things, okay? The ICAT, again, it is the institutional capacity assessment tool. Introduce that to the institution and get that to be used by the institution, and then plan the institutional activities. Provide ad hoc support to universities. There are service workshops, integrating data across the university. So within the network of Siya Phumelela, there are many workshops, there are many activities that take place every year. All institutions that are part of that network are invited to that, to send delegates to it, as well as contributing to the activity. You can, as an institution, say, we are strong in this particular aspect of the project and we'd like to present workshops, and you can do that as well. But you can also benefit from the other institutions. You participate in the network activities. The coach provides these reports. The important thing is improvement in student success through evidence-based interventions at scale. That's very important, underlying the Siya Phumelela program. Okay, so if you look at the overview of the coaching model, the coach interacts primarily with the team leads, plus members of the team, and a member of the executive who oversees the student success work. The coach seeks to understand the strategic plan, culture, student success structures and resources, and key players and their roles. So every institution's got its own strategic plan, it's got its own culture, it's got its own structures. So it's important for the coach to get a feel for that. I mentioned that already, and that's been done already. Okay. And we are involved in all these development activities, which is ongoing for the coaches. Okay, so what did we learn from the institutions that we worked with? So this is something that has come over the past years. We find that not one size fits all. Every institution has got a different context, different history. The goals and outcomes are different in the memorandum of understanding that we have with the project of Siya Phumelela. The strategic intentions and goals are different. Cultures are different. And it's important for the coach to understand that. The resources vary tremendously with all the universities in South Africa, as you know that. the point at which each institution is starting with student success and the existing strengths are different. The capacity to collect data, clean data, and to do the analytics varies tremendously. You'd be surprised how different it is within the South African higher education landscape. Institutional perceptions versus evidence-based findings. Very important that we stress this, that when the institutions make claims about what they're doing, they have to back it up with evidence. Okay. We also need to learn from what successful institutions do. So networking is extremely important. Okay. So if you go back from 2014 to today in South Africa, some universities have made tremendous progress. I'm not going to mention them, but some have done pretty well, and it's based on very strong fundamentals, okay, that they have achieved, which are linked to the aims of Siyaphumelela. Okay. These institutions also involved the leadership, the senior leadership, as well as senior academics, students, data analytics team members, professional staff, support staff, and all of that was put together as a team, and they made tremendous achievements. They adopted an organizing framework to align all the work necessary to advance and accelerate improvements. They developed and advanced each institution's own theory of change based on the overall Siyaphumelela aims, the culture, the context, etc. And it's important, very, very important. There has to be a commitment to work with deliberate pace, a sense of urgency, and also to act intentionally. You'll find in some institutions they take on board the Siyaphumelela project. They're part of the network, but unfortunately, the intent is lacking, the urgency is lacking, and they do not set a reasonable pace at which to achieve these goals. As I pointed out, and I'll repeat this, the leadership within the university is key to the institutional buy-in. You've got to send that message out from the top to the institution. We are taking this seriously, okay? And so the centrality of leadership, the executive, the lead and project team, student success committee, all of these are important components in succeeding at an institution. The seniority of the lead is important. You cannot have somebody who is junior and you say, well, you're going to be the lead for our institution and you're going to represent us. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. You've got to have somebody with a reasonable level of seniority so that they're taken seriously by the institution. It's important also high-level planning. It's not planning at the bottom, it's planning at the high level, and it's got to be the entire institution. Monitoring and evaluation is important. One of the other challenges is dealing with leadership changes. Many institutions change the leadership perhaps too frequently for whatever reason. There's always a problem with handover, with the new person coming in. Then it's important then for prompt communication with the coach, with Siyaphumelela, to try and fast track onboarding with new staff members and setting up consultation with new leaders. So it's always a challenge when there's a change of leadership. Okay, how did the coach help the institution learn about using evidence for scaled student success? So let's look at these slides. So there are tools. You can use certain tools, okay? And structures. One of them is this student success team. It may sound foreign to you, but most of the network partners have got a student success team or the equivalent. And the advantage of this, it is representative, It brings on board various stakeholders, and nobody's left out. Everybody who's important and relevant play a role in this Student Success Committee or Student Success Team. And this is one way of breaking down the silos that exist in many universities. So this committee intentionally involves a range of stakeholders on this committee. And this is a nice one. There's an African saying, it takes a whole village to educate a child. Similarly, it takes the whole university community to help students to be successful. Academics, student support, advising, counseling, health and well-being, residences, student security, finance, etc. So really, I'm making this point again. You've got to get everybody on board. Nobody can be left out or left behind. You're part of this initiative, and it's very, very important. The committee is used, that's the Student Success Committee, to develop a common understanding of student success within the university, build data capacity within the committee, involve different groupings within the committee on integrated projects to achieve student success goals. And ICAT, I'll come to that just now, is used as well. Remember that some universities have got 5 campuses. They're spread out over vast areas. So really, you need to have structures that are really relevant and are efficient in dealing with these challenges. This is ICAT, a depiction of it. And what it does, it helps institutions integrate and align 7 essential capacities. These are the capacities: teaching and learning, engagement and communication, strategy and planning, policies and practices, leadership and vision, data, technology, equity, and all of this is about student-focused culture. While we're talking about policies and practices, I want to tell you that you may find policies and practices that mitigate against student success. It's very important. Many universities have got many policies, and some of them, unfortunately, are not aligned to student success. So this is what's used to assess the capacity of an institution, right? And you get all stakeholders participating in this online assessment. There's an analysis done, and it actually tells you a lot about the institution. And so it's a very important tool. Okay, so the coach also needs to ask very important questions about the institutional data. The systems where data reside, are they integrated? What data does the institution have? What data are relevant to collect and analyze? What new data do they need to collect? Is the data understandable by all stakeholders? Is it presented in such a manner that nobody can understand what it means? Are they actionable? And are they actioning the data? Are the data timelessly shared widely with all stakeholders, academic support staff, professional, administrative staff? Are all stakeholders aware of the data, what it means, how the students are passing, failing, performing? Yes? 5 minutes. Oh, thank you. Okay. So data resources and institutional analytics capacity cannot be assumed. Okay? So because of that, this Sia Phumelela project makes sure that we start right at the beginning and everybody understands what it's about. So all the partners within the network go through workshops. One of them is called Know Your Data. It's an introductory course, then it's an advanced course, but it helps partners how to present the data, how to get the maximum out of the data, okay? The coach can also help an institution to become unstuck, okay? So if there's a problem with certain issues, they can help monitor, evaluate the strategy of the institution. Often the lead of the institution is swamped, overworked. They find it difficult to share or delegate, and that's often a problem. What are some of the challenges that you encountered as coaches? So this is what we encountered over the many universities. Each university for itself, okay? And then within institutions, you find departments, units, also inward looking, not outward looking. So those were common issues that we picked up, but fortunately through the Sia Phumelela network, we managed to make some advances in that area and break down these silos, and also to really get a committee, get an analysis, ICAT analysis done, and also looking at goals that are important. Priorities and strengths, often we find that institutions want to do too much with little focus, little depth. So that's important to address. And the university needs, as I mentioned, try to do too much on their own. They need to share the work. This is common. Organizations resist change. They don't want to be told, you should change. They often feel that what they're doing is fine, they're doing well. So this is normal. But I think with working together with Sia Phumelela, working together with a coach, we come to some understanding that there is a need for change. Okay? Some of the successes, there's a few examples. It's not exhaustive. The system has benefited through greater networking, a more common understanding of student success, and awareness of the use of data to improve student outcomes. The student success journey started slowly at some institutions, some resistance, but has gained traction. The student success committees or its equivalent exist at all network universities. Data collection and analysis has moved into the spotlight, particularly analytics that is accessible to a wider audience of non-specialists through dashboards. So it's important to share this with all stakeholders. Workshops are led by each institution, become very popular. New concepts of what data are important to South African universities. In some universities where you have a homogeneous race group, you find that it's not just about race, it's about class, it's about other issues as well. Okay? And then another important aspect is the establishment of a community of practice for coaches that generates new knowledge and sharing through discussion. So with that, I'll stop and I thank you for your time. Okay, Francois.
Bala, thank you. Well, thank you very much for that. I think it gives you a very high level at an institutional level as to the kind of networking and opportunities that we have to undertake, such as through the Sia Phumelela project. But I think you also shared with us some of the institutional kind of planning that needs to take place to ensure student success. We're now going to have Francois Strydom, and he's going to give us a much more detailed kind of look at student success, and I'm sure, Francois, at your own institution as well, right? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, am I on? Can people hear me? Can I quickly get a sense of the room? Academics, just thank you. Support staff, important people, students. Teasing academics, teasing. I can see you, dearie. Thank you for keeping your hand up extra long. Right. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's great to be here. You can see I was incredibly creative with the title, Student Success at UFS, right? It is a privilege to talk about this topic. Thank you so much to Bala for the introduction. I'll refer, and you'll see the salient points that he raised around Sia Phumelela. He gave you lots of detail around how much depth there is to the work. I'm going to give you our journey. You can start. Where's that nice student? Don't sleep now. How can you do that now? 20 minutes. I'm teasing. Right, 20 minutes and I'll be through. Okay. So conceptually, we're going to start with this graph. So we've been working for about, as Bala said, 2 decades on student success work, and our work is based in student engagement. So this is contextualized for South Africa. What you can see here is you can see all universities have international pressures and national pressures, right? So I don't need to tell you, you know in the Western Cape, what are your local provincial pressures. Some of you are aware of the global pressures that universities are under. What we do know is that what happens before university matters for success, right? Changing a 29,000 institution education system is difficult, right? So, but you do need to know your students extremely well, and ideally you would like a smooth ride into employment or postgraduate study. But that is not the case for the majority of students in the system, right? These 2 circles are incredibly important because they've got about a century of higher education research behind them. On the left side, you can see there is a student agency. So those are the things we know students need to do to succeed. For example, studying helps, right? Talking to peers help. But you have to create the conditions to empower students to do that sometimes. On the right hand is institutional responsiveness. What programs, interventions do institutions need to put in place to make sure that students don't stare into the abyss when you're talking to them, right? Like some of them are doing now while I'm talking, right? So now we're going to go into context. So for those of you that have got a lot of stereotypes about the Free State, let's see how many of them are accurate, how many of them are completely wrong, and I won't ask you to tell me as stereotypes because then I embarrass everybody, but at least that wakes people up, I see a little bit. So 41,000 students about, you can see the split between undergrad and postgrad, you can see the split between the campuses. The most beautiful one, KwaKwa, in the picturesque Eastern Cape, right? The most resilient, inspiring group of people you will find. Machabeng has imploded, and that campus just keeps on going, right? An amazing group of people together. And then something that Free State is starting to get known for, our sustained focus on equity, success, and quality. And sustained is the very important word there. So next, some data points about your students. Bala mentioned we need to know who our students are. Ahmed Bawa, we worked with him on a national project on knowing our students. Unfortunately, higher education globally wish always they had different students, right? Or they work on how were the students when I was one. Right? So here's some data. There you can see over 10 years how this race profile at the university, first time entering students, has changed. You can see fees must fall, access to finances made a big difference. You'll see similar trends in many public universities. I can't comment about Stellenbosch. And why I'm sharing this data openly with you, colleagues, is to confront you about what do you know. Support staff, academics, and students. What do you know? Just because you're a student doesn't mean you know everything about students. Right? Just because you're an academic and you've been teaching your course for 10 years doesn't mean you know everything about your students. Right? So, on the right-hand side, from the beginning university survey of student engagement, you can see the line for first-gen students. Right? Incredibly important data point for us. Right? Because if you're the first in your family to come to university, as in the case of the University of the Free State, 8 out of 10 people sitting in front of me would be the first in their family there. Massive amount of literature on the implication of that one statistic. You saw 90% of our students are African, 64% of them are female. Many of you thought all of us came from the Free State. 40% of the students come from Free State, 36% from Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal, mostly around the KwaKwa campus, rural KwaZulu-Natal, right? And then almost 40% of our students are between 20 and 22. What does that mean for the people you're teaching? You're talking to them like they're a fresh matriculant. Would that be a little bit insulting? I don't know. Oh, I knew I've got some inkling. So I talked about a sustained focus on equity, success, and quality. So we're extremely proud of this graph. Some of the people in the room are part of this journey and have helped us reach this goal. Those are the 4 racial categories in South Africa. And you can see 2 things. Firstly, there's a slight positive gradient in the graph, which means regardless of your race, you're more successful in the University of the Free State in 2022 than you were in 2012. Right? So success rates overall are better. What we're incredibly proud about is the achievement gap between the blue line and the yellow line, black and white students. 10 years ago, it was a gap of about 16%. That gap is down to 7%. Right? And we've all worked on that. Like Professor Pillay said, everybody. There's somebody cleaning a residence, and they see a student's room is many superlatives, a mess. That cleaner should say, how can you study in such a mess? If your notes are everywhere. Right? That should be the depth of commitment in an institution. What are our structures? Last contextual slide, because some of you might be sitting here and thinking, why the hell do I need to know about Free State context? I have enough of my own problems, right? So the faculties, 7 faculties. On your left, you can see the deans, right? Next to the deans is vice deans. That's something new. We're appointing vice deans for teaching and learning, and linked to them, teaching and learning managers. Now, teaching and learning managers has been a contested term at the University of the Free State for a long time. If you have time, interested, I can regale you with the history of that naming. Teaching and learning coordinators is people we appoint to support teaching and learning managers and vice deans. So CTL is on the right-hand side supporting the academic core. It's very important that you need to notice here is it's a hybrid. It's not CTL and the rest of the institution. It is faculties and the Center for Teaching and Learning working together. Another point that Prof Bala raised. Right. So now I'm going to take you through a journey. There's 5 steps, right? Or 5 stages that we went through. I think we're doing okay for time. So you will see in every slide, I talk about the internal and the external. That's the internal and the external environments. Those of you that are in organizational psychology will know for an institution to survive, it needs to constantly adapt to internal changes and external changes. Right? So I'll start in this stage with the internal. Right? So we recognized as an institution we have to change the equitable results of our students. And as far back as 2006, there was an intentional creation of the Division for Student Development and Success. I was asked to start that, and it was then reporting under Student Affairs. Right? And top management already said student success is important, but they just said it. And we're creating this one division. Right? So follow now how things evolved in the journey. So what did we do? Franny from the Free State went, okay, so who's doing work on student and success? And I was very, very lucky to find the student engagement research community, headed up by George Koo. And that community was doing leading work in the world. Now, student engagement is done on every continent except the Arctic and Antarctica, right? So not met penguins that are into student engagement yet, but it might just happen, right? The centrality of the student voice was absolutely critical in this work. You gave students a data-driven voice, so they came to the table of institutional planning as not just opinions, as not just a transient SRC voice that's driven by external political agendas, but I'm sure that it never happens at Stellenbosch. Right? Students are completely independent and they're not manipulated by outside political forces. Right? Yeah, now people are waking up a little bit. I like that. Right. Institutional design, or intentional institutional design, to link up to the word Prof Pillay used, of focusing on quality undergraduate education. That's what the student engagement work was about. Right? So SASE started in 2007. I was much younger, had much more hair, and was less gray. Right. So I want to show you what the SASE information is that you get. All right. And the reason I'm showing that is to make the point. Prof Pillay refers to the ICAT. When I started this work, there was the Alpha and Omega questionnaire, and I can't remember the colleagues who was doing it. Alton, right. So I'm not terribly, I obviously think this engagement work is good, so I've stuck with it for a while, or it's maybe the only thing I've understood for 15 years. But anyway, that doesn't matter. As long as you have evidence, that's the key thing, right? You need to have your data points. So here you can see the kinds of things that is measured by this instrument. Are different students talking to each other? Is there collaborative learning? Is there effective teaching practices? Is it a supportive environment? Now, the blue bar, you can see Free State is higher than the comparison group. That's been the case for the last 5 years, regardless of the institutions. This last year was 7 institutions. I put this in so you can see how the success field has moved. Advising modules. So we've got specific, if you want to call them subscales. I don't know if there's psychologists in the room, because this does have psychometric properties. You have advising, you have experiences with writing, inclusiveness and decoloniality, right? Looking at that. New things that we're looking at, career and workforce preparation, online learning, and what we're particularly excited about is the qualitative data component. Now, we started asking students, what's the one thing that you would change? And we could give feedback to Stellenbosch top management about this is the one thing students want changed, right? Next, about student engagement, and it's important, and you'll see why you need to understand this. So a high impact practice is something that creates a deep integrative learning experience for students. It engages them at a very deep level, and it allows them to perform better, especially those from under-resourced or underserved populations. Now, the list there is a South African list. The American list is 10, and it's ridiculously out of date in my opinion. But you can see there's student society. So those of you that are involved in student politics, it's good, right? Not always, but it's good, right? And you'll see why. And the red ones are ones I'm going to talk about at Free State. Some of the new things we're doing, I know Stellenbosch is particularly strong on the mental health side. Institutionally, I don't know whether you guys know your mental health data. If not, why not? Especially my student leaders. Huh? Are you focused on your constituents or what somebody else tells you about your constituents? Right. The second level, or the second step or stage, is redesigning your learning environment for success. And look now how I link to Prof Pillay, national sharing. Right? So this is our journey. We did work for CHE with the SASE. But the most important thing, we were very excited about, we were asking to do national work, but we started talking to other people. We visited UJ, we went to Rhodes, I went everywhere across the country, and I would get there and I would see different institutional contexts trying to address this similar problem of student success. Right? So internally, I was asked to start the Center for Teaching and Learning. Our design actually is out of necessity. They said these things need to come together, right? It actually created some necessity-driven innovation. Student success, staff development, e-learning, all together in one center with academic literacy. And you see why that was fortuitous. We conceptualized the CTL as a strategic partner in organizational change. Right? That was intentional, but the hybrid design is important. It was a blend of faculty and CTL support. And we are very serious about that. We have monthly meetings in which faculties tell us what they need and we change. And you heard Prof Pillay talk about change being difficult, right? And then a collective action approach where we've thrown the backbone. So there you can see our mission. All I want you to see is the kinds of services that we offer. Now, I know from Dr. van der Merwe that your configuration is different at Stellenbosch. You don't have to have this configuration. But these are the elements: evidence-based change, blended learning and innovation support, academic language and literacy development, advising access and success, transition, and student learning and success. Right. Third step, only 2 more to go. Right. So scaling high impact practices with analytics. Pillay talked about analytics, and you saw the 4 things I highlighted in red. Right. So we started doing the work. Kreski scaled the SASSI project. This was a little bit before Siyapumelela, and then we became a founding partner and became part of that conversation. And Prof Pillay already mentioned Georgia State, a world leader, very, very similar student populations to South Africa, actually, where the majority of students are on financial aid, as we know in our system. So the 4 things we scaled. First year transition, it's called UFSS, University of the Free State Success Skills, but it was called UFS 101 initially. 100 teaching assistants, those are senior students, and it helps 8,200 students every year. It's something that you have to do at the University of the Free State. And it teaches you success skills in the first semester, reinforces them in the second semester, but also introduces you to entrepreneurship, digital skills, how to build your career, as well as the graduate attributes of the institution. The second one, tutorials, that won't be foreign for anybody. It's 444 students we employ, and the numbers will make sense in a second. And we helped 10,212 students in last year. Academic advising, I'll talk a little bit more about that. Colleagues asked me to elaborate. The impact there, 12,706 students were advised. So you can see, similar to what Prof Pillay said, you can see how our work in Siyapumelela helped us to change and become better. Right? We scaled work. We learned how to scale. We learned that Pretoria were finding it difficult. Nelson Mandela was struggling with the same problems we had. Academic language and literacy development. 93% of our students have English as a second, third, or fourth language. Only 7% of students can speak English. Right? And our language of instruction is English. So we helped 11,840 students last year with academic literacy courses, because very few schools actually teach you how to read an academic textbook, how to formulate an argument, how to analyze an argument and synthesize your own, and not use ChatGPT, but I'm sure nobody at Stellenbosch uses ChatGPT. That's just in the Free State, okay? And then we help 6,051 students in our writing center, where students come in, or a lecturer we're in the education faculty in pedagogics might phone us and say, I would like all my first years to write an assignment, and we structure an online digital workshop that takes students through how systematically they write an assignment correctly. Right, advising. So I'm not going to give you the full Siyapumelela definition. We led the work stream on this. It's an ongoing and intentional teaching and learning practice that empowers students in their learning development to explore, align, and succeed in their personal, academic, and career goals. Right. So why did we start in 2010 academic advising? Because we looked at our data. We saw that the majority of our students were first gen. Right? And we know from literature that a student would rather ask their cousin, this is data from the US, the Latinx students, would rather ask a cousin that failed at university for advice than ask the institution for advice, right? Because despite the fact that I really love students and I want to work with them, that's why I tease them, I'm scary to a first generation student, right? Because I'm prof, right? So I think our road, and if you have questions about it, we can talk about it. How did we get the institution to buy in? We actually did an analysis of credit overload. We found, I won't name the faculty, we found that a student had registered for 480 credits in 1 year. Now, for some of the students, I don't know whether you know, but it's supposed to be 120. So we found that staff members, because they felt sorry for a student, was actually killing that student. Because nobody can pass 480 credits in a year. I don't know. You might have students like that, but we certainly don't, right? So I had little brown envelopes, not with money, with the overloaded students. And I had a meeting with the deans, Antoinette, and I gave each dean the student record of who was overloaded in their faculty. So nobody could say, it's not us, right? That problem we solved, but it's come back. And it's come back because of minimum time to degree. So where do we advise? It's integrated in UFSS. You heard me talking about career development, right? Individual and group sessions. You can make an appointment and say, thought I wanted to do medicine, really sucks. I want to do engineering. How do you make that change without ridiculously increasing your years at the university, which is expensive, right? Digital guides, Facebook. Our newest work, a chatbot. It had 1 million interactions last year. So the chatbot is rule-based, but if the chatbot can't answer you, you're put through to a call center, and you can get support. But that same call center, we run data analytics, and we identify students who are at risk, and we phone them. And we say, Mpo, we know first year is tough. How are things with you? And then Mpo starts telling us. And we direct. So how many advisors? We started with 1 advisor. We had a half, actually. And then we had 1. Now we're up to 6 in CTL. Very important for the colleagues in the room. The other 44 in the advising forum are from faculties. And why? Because faculty started realizing this is important. Some of you might know what a FTE loading is. If you don't have a FTE loading of 1, you don't maximize your state subsidy. If your FTE loading is lower than 1, students are not taking the full course load, you are not getting the subsidy you need to take. We did an analysis a couple of years ago. Advising added 6 million rand in subsidy income. That pays for all the salaries that you need. 500 peer advisors. You remember the tutors and the TAs I spoke about? All of them are trained in peer advising. What's a peer advisor? A peer advisor is Francois, who's a third honors student. And Francois is a bit scary than old Francois, right? So I go to Tsepo and I say, listen, I'm really struggling with chemistry, or I can't take the pressure anymore. And that tutor, Tsepo, tells Francois, go to student counseling or go see an advisor, because you don't always need to go to student counseling to learn stress management skills. Right? So in that way, we create multiple nets of support so students don't fall through the cracks as far as we can. Sometimes there are, but we try to minimize that. We are the only university that offers a training course in academic advising, the AAPD, and we've trained the first 302 advisors. The head of advising is Gugu Tiraboni, an absolutely amazing person, right? And I know some of our Stellenbosch colleagues are coming to visit us. Stage 4. Okay, I need to hurry up. I got excited. Siya Phumelela kept influencing but started changing leadership. But leadership themselves also changed and started saying, opinion doesn't cut it. Let's go back to the evidence. Yusuf came on board and said we have to understand who our students are in the system, and we did work for them. Then during COVID, DET came to us and we had to do a national survey on how COVID was affecting students, and then in 2021, the staff as well, how they think about the future. Internally, what did we build? Data analytic capacity. That faculties know where students are falling out. In your BEd degrees, do you know what the high impact, or if you want to call them killer modules, which is rather unfortunate, what are the modules that students struggle with? Do you know? Who fails? Right? Why do they fail? And then our new VC had a very critical focus, and this is an incredibly important point. He made student success and well-being the #1 strategic priority. Pretoria did it before us, and we saw the same results. Because if you help people focus, you focus resources, things start to happen at universities. The last is where we are now, and our focus is on minimum time to degree, linking to Prof Pillay, but also employability. All of you saw in your institutional audit manuals, student success has been broadened. It's not just getting the degree anymore, it's now whether you're employable, and also the conversation around graduate attributes. We had our graduate attribute development plan approved in 2019. Whole separate talk, very excited, huge project that we are working hard on. Vision 130 for 2034, that's when the university will be 100 years old. There you can see our aspirations. Research-led, student-centered, regionally engaged, globally competitive graduates, because that's social justice. That's what we're aspiring to. What have we, if you think Free State has arrived, don't understand the complexity of the problem, minimum time to degree is a massive challenge in this country. Because of the huge inequality, only less than 40% of our 3-year degree students get their degrees in minimum time. What does that mean? It means family having to pay even more, because we know NSFAS does not cover everything. Right? So how do we make the system and change so that we can support our students, right? And help them get their degree in minimum time. We have huge gaps, and internationally there's a massive gap between the achievement of degrees between females achieving the degrees much faster and at a higher percentage than males. In South Africa, that's double digits now. That's a serious problem, people. And between the race, still those gaps. So researched moments of reflection, you need institutional commitment. Prof Pillay talked about top management needs to commit, but it doesn't help top management as a game changer and everybody else is looking for the game. Right? You need to have commitment throughout. That needs to be based on global research and best practices. I spoke in Beijing. I wasn't patient zero for COVID. That was the end of 2019 we were there. And the Chinese are struggling with the same thing. Right. Redesigning your learning environment. That's a very easy sentence. It's a very difficult thing to do at universities. But a very possible thing to do. Prof Pillay's examples on how you can do that. We call our success committee the Siya Phumelela task team. Right? And that's been running for, I think we're coming up to a decade. The high impact practices, the analytics, the evidence-based decision making, and then the minimum time. That's it. Sorry, that was a bit over.
Francois, thank you very much for that presentation. Very insightful, going into actually the nuts and bolts of what it takes to ensure student success. Colleagues, students, it's now time for comments and questions to Bala and to Francois. I know, Antoinette, you said you got a question online.
Thanks. I'm just going to state the question on behalf of Dr. Marinette Jordan from journalism. She asked, Francois, am I understanding correctly that student success here is evaluated mostly in quantitative terms or data points? I understand the value and importance of surveys and related data for making informed high-level decisions. Just interested in what the nature of the qualitative engagements, focus groups, interviews and such is about how students themselves formulate success.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. Is it okay, Chair, if I speak? Thank you. I think we have multiple ways. So I've forefront the student engagement, that's the longitudinal data, but we also did a 250 participant student journey mapping that was all qualitative. And where students flagged to us deeper, because we all know survey data has huge limitations. We know the limitations for about a century of survey data, but you need to deeply understand what frustrates students, right? What administrative processes don't they understand? I didn't mention it here, but we created hashtag Secure the Grad, which is for senior students, because the senior students said to us, great, you gave us UFSS in first year and then you just left us. So that is a webinar-driven series that helps students with how do I deal with appeals, where do I get financial aid, how do I start networking, things like that. So this is a mixed methodology problem. If you come at it just with survey data, you will not crack it. You have to blend it.
I think there is also a third dimension of once they graduate, whether they can make success of the studies they've had here. And maybe in some sense that is the most important measure, because that's what matters. They come here because so that they can have a good life afterwards, right? So, and I don't think we do much in terms of that to follow up on their success, or the student success after they've graduated.
I agree. That's why our phase, the stage in which we are now, is employability. So we are working. Some of the ranking stuff looks at employability, but we do graduate exit surveys and we do graduate destination surveys we're busy with now. So it's an incredibly important dimension. Bala.
I think that's a very important point. And there are some universities in South Africa that are taking that on board to look at, post-graduation. And I think that's something that's very, very important. And often the university will say we need to train our students for the workplace to be employable. The reality is, how many of your academic staff have worked in industry, have worked in relevant industries? Very, very few. So all of them cannot be working in industries. I think the institutions have an obligation to really facilitate that amongst their staff so they can pass it on to students in a meaningful way. But it's a very important point. And obviously, with our poor economy, it's also a struggle. And we need to also look at self-employability as well. I think that's very, very important.
Thank you, colleagues. One question for you, Prof Bala. It relates to the identification of a class as a factor for reporting. Going into the future, how do you hope to manage that, taking into account that in South Africa, class is very much embroiled with race? One question for you, Francois. I'm not sure whether it's one or two. The first one relates to the 480 credits for a year. That is practically impossible. How would the system allow that in the first place? The second one for you is, You have related to us a very good story of UFS, and the UFS inherited a campus that was historically disadvantaged. What kind of lessons can you give to us as an institution that has never meshed with a historically disadvantaged institution? However, with our diversification of a student population, we are beginning to see more and more of NSFAS beneficiaries who fall in that category. Thanks.
I didn't get the first question. Can you just repeat that? I didn't get it entirely.
Yeah, in your presentation, you related that you have since identified class as a significant data point. How do you hope to manage that, taking into account that class is very much embroiled with race in this country?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I must respond to say that in the past, throughout this program, often there was a focus on race until we got on board and looked at universities where there was a very homogeneous population in terms of race. For them, it's new, and I don't think we've studied that in depth to really address that. It's a new challenge for us, and we will certainly look at that because it's something that's come up recently. So we still have to look at that, but thank you for the question.
I've got 2 questions online and 1 comment. So the one question from Yeki is the following. Let me just quickly get there. Do the Siyaphumelela committees also include colleagues in the co-curricular, for example, student affairs, and with other divisions, internal stakeholders? That's a question for you, Francois, or to Bala. And the second question is to the university management or the leadership. The question is, will we be joining the Siyaphumelela project? And then the comment is, thank you very much. That's from Marinette, who asked the question about the quantitative, qualitative. Just thank you, very inspiring, a lot of ideas of what one can do with modules courses that are already compulsory to many students. So I think there's one question to you, Francois, and then one to you, Deresh.
Yeah, I think Francois still got to answer the 2 from Zetu.
Okay. So the 480, that was 2009, and I'm happy to say that's never ever happened again. The story behind that was multiple siblings needing a bursary, and one sibling had to finish for the next sibling to have any chance of university. So the stories, and this relates then to Kwakwa as well, when you're confronted with socioeconomics, so one of the things you could use for class potentially is NSFAS as an indicator. But if students start telling you, firstly, what they had to overcome, how hard it's been to adapt to university, administrators, academics, deans are put in very vulnerable spaces about, I have a human being in front of me. And then there needs to be some very difficult conversations about, despite it being a human being, we cannot let you register for X amount of credits. You will not make it. But if there's somebody breaking down in front of you, I don't know about you, but for the first time, we have students that come to us for advising and in reception start breaking down from the stress. It's the first time. I attribute it to what students had to go through, the problems around the pandemic. But if you have somebody breaking in front of you, how strong are you going to be? It's very easy to say it's physically impossible that students threaten to end themselves. I think that's difficult conversations. It sounds very easy and it sounds entertaining, but it's tragic. Kwakwa, what is amazing about the Kwakwa colleagues is the phenomenal resilience. Kwakwa has now success work that is an absolute equitable partner in the Siyapumelela conversations. But this week, there was community protests on campus. Why do they protest about service delivery on campus? It's one of the only places the community gets reaction. We had to sink 2 million liters of 7 boreholes to get 2 million liters of water, so the campus would have water. And at the end of last year, we connected the microgrid. In Potarichaba, at the bottom of the hill, there's 80 to 90% unemployment. If there's not load shedding, there's load reduction because the municipality did not pay its bills. Right? We were reviewed last week, and the people online from the US and Ireland were just, it's amazing. So I have a very special place for Kwakwa in my heart. I knew it when it was UNIQA already. I did my first academic presentation there. And they keep us grounded about where the country is and why this work is so important. Because if you do a degree at Kwakwa, you're physically lifting your whole family out of poverty. And that's why this work is important. It's social justice work, right? Every degree is greater equality in this country. Every single degree. I think that's the lessons. Yeah, Siyapumelela includes all people and should include all functions in an institution as soon as possible. But as Bala mentioned, it was just one sentence. Getting people to work together ain't easy. And let me let you in on a little secret. If people at a university don't talk to each other, shockingly, their data doesn't talk to each other because they don't share it. All right? Yeah.
I just want to add to it. I think oftentimes colleagues don't get involved in certain activities for different reasons. One of them, though, is when the university itself does not recognize certain activities. When you, for example, look at performance management, you're looking at ticking the boxes, my research publications, my postgrad students, my whatever. Why don't you recognize the other important aspects for student success? So it actually needs, a mindset change by the institution. When someone say, listen, if I'm going to help students pass, if I'm going to get a better minimum time completion, it goes in favor of my performance. And that's what the universities need to do.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brady. I'm outgoing SRC sport manager and executive candidate. Question number 1 is directed to all staff. Question number 2 to Stellenbosch staff. Question number 1, which specific students or student groups will serve on the student success coaching? Second question, it was found that there is a fault in the YEMIS system whereby when students go and get their YEMIS checked, the system will produce a figure. But when there's a manual calculation done, it was found that students are actually above the requirements. So what is the university doing to minimize that? And then also the first question. Thank you.
So to go to your first question, the institution is now in the process of designing what we're calling an institutional wraparound support, which will speak to student success. Now, in the presentations that you had from both Bala and from Francois, you saw there's particular components that make up what we would term institutional wraparound support. The first one, from our point of view, is with regards to funding. We know that funding is key in terms of student success. There's a very high correlation between having adequate funding for our students and the success rate of the students. The second one is, I think they both touched on, is psychosocial support, We know that if you don't have that in place and strong support in that place, and that doesn't necessarily mean just student counselors and educational psychologists, but also using technology in terms of enabling better psychosocial support within the institution. And I think you talked about some of the chatbots that were being used at Free State. So that's a second area that we're looking at. The third area is in terms of strengthening the data analytics that we have within the institution. And that is in terms of, as soon as possible, determining students in need of academic advising, academic support, whatever the support is that they require, determining as soon as possible, and then to intervene as soon as possible in that regard. The fourth one is in terms of academic advising, which Francois spoke a lot about, and academic mentoring. Preparedness and employability. So those are the components that we are currently developing within the institution. We are hoping to roll out academic advising and academic mentoring for all new first-year students in 2024. And then subsequent years thereafter, we will expand and scale up in terms of the full suite of wraparound support within the institution. So I think that's a plan that we have in place, and eventually working us to an institution where we will have full wraparound support for all students within the institution. As Francois said, this is something that's significant. We've taken a decision as an institution that student success is a very, very high priority for us as an institution, given the changing demographics that we have within the institution. So as I mentioned a bit earlier, this university has had a very high student success rate, but that comes from a past whereby our student demographic wasn't as diverse as what it is now. And as we get that changing student demographic, and I'm talking about demographics, I'm not just talking about race, I'm also talking about whether students are commuting and resident students or first generation. Those are all the different kind of categories of demographics, including socioeconomic class as well. So we're hoping that in time we will have this full wraparound support in place within the institution. The numbers with regards to students that will be peer advisors and peer mentors and facilitators and so forth, we are still finalizing that. But the idea is that we'll have an institutional level kind of advising and mentorship, then at a faculty level, and then at a departmental level. So that is currently being put together, and we're hoping that in the course of the next few months, we'll be able to share that with the entire university community for implementation for all first years in 2024. With regards to the YEMIS, I'm not too sure, Antoinette, you want to answer that? Elton, you got to answer first there? Yeah. So with regards to an error in the YEMIS, I'm not too sure about that. I can't comment about that. But I do know that we do have challenges with regards to YEMIS in terms of students that were overcredited. And as a result of that, we took a Senate decision. I can't remember when it was it beginning of this year? So we just as Francois had mentioned, at his institution, you ended up with some students having very large credit loadings. And it's because the system enabled them to register for well over the norm in terms of credit loadings. We had a similar situation at Stellenbosch University. The numbers that I saw is that we had something like 7,000 or 8,000 students that were over-registered, significantly over-registered in terms of credits. Some of them as high as 1.6, 1.7, 1.8 YEMIS. To bear in mind that one YEMIS is basically your normal workload, right? And then what we found is when we started to analyze the data is that once you get past 1.2 YEMIS, the success rate starts to drop off drastically. So obviously students were allowed to over-register. Our system allowed them to over-register, and that played into the issue of student success. We've now got a Senate ruling that students will not be able to register more than, I think it's 1.25 YEMIS, and even at that case, there need to be a good justification as to why they need to register for more than one YEMIS. So we're hoping to also be able to assist students in appropriately planning how they register And we also, as part of academic renewal, will be looking at putting in a much more understandable student progression system within the institution. Because I can tell you now, very few academics understand HEMIS, let alone students. And therefore it becomes extremely difficult for students to understand what it means to meet HEMIS. So we're hoping that as part of academic renewal, one of the components that we'll be undertaking is putting in a very clearly understood student progression system within the institution.
There's one more question online for Francois, for you, from Prof Ronaldo Priya-Snyman from the Faculty of Economic Management Sciences. She's the Vice Dean Teaching and Learning. Her question is, can you tell us more about the teaching and learning manager's role? And then I think the other question was still, will we join Siyaphumelela? But we'll get back to that one. So first, Francois.
I can just say, I just want to link to the question around data quality and HEMIS data. If you get into the data analytic work, and there's massive amounts of employment for students in data, there is no organization that has perfect data. I'm not making excuses. It's phenomenal that your institution has identified. Don't know whether the HEMIS refers to an FTE loading. That's amazing because you know where the problem is and how to fix it. But I just want to underscore how incredibly important accurate data is from registration straight through. The teaching and learning manager's role. So currently we're differentiating between the vice dean and the teaching and learning managers. Our teaching and learning managers are the superheroes at the University of the Free State. During Fees Must Fall, during COVID, that group of people would sit and work with us, and together we would create solutions that help the institution go through. In COVID, we were able to have 99.95% of our students participate in the academic project. That analytics, and that's because we had people, teaching and learning managers, who work closely. They're in the dean's offices, but they work closely with academics, and they're also very close to students. So they understand what is the challenges of a science students at the University of the Free State. And because we meet with them during crises, we would have weekly meetings, but we meet with them very regularly, and they would say, this aspect of registration does not work. We have to change it. Or our students are, we can see that there's a course that's very problematic, and then we would work on a solution. So currently, a teaching and learning manager was a combination of strategic as well as operational role in a faculty, and they work primarily with helping academic staff with the challenges. Now with the differentiation, our deans will focus, our vice deans were starting to clarify what the difference would be between those two roles, most probably a strategic versus operational differentiation, but they'll have to work very closely together.
So in response to the issue around HEMIS and staff not understanding HEMIS and it being misleading, I think it's symptomatic of a much bigger crisis at Stellenbosch with the administration. There's too much administration, and the proportion of administrators to academic staff is like 2 to 1. But we seem to get more administration as a result, so we're filling in more forms of which I don't understand any of them. And I've been an academic for 30 years, and my grandfather was a professor, so I shouldn't have any excuse at all. But I cannot understand the Stellenbosch system, and it makes for enormous stress. So a lot of academics actually want to spend more time helping graduate students find themselves having to fill out enormous forms. Just for example, the administration seems to be deciding for us, you know, how our course outlines must look, and they gave us a 14-page template. I'm not filling in 14 pages, and neither is any student going to read 14 pages. So it's these kinds of things. It's particularly bad at some universities, but it does take away our energy to be able to support students better, to give better quality training, and all of these things. I really think we need to deal with this. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to take you back to the resistance that you face during the implementation of this program. I think it's Professor Pillay mentioned that there's been resistance to change. What have you experienced with your university, the University of Free State? Have you seen faculties that were more resistant than other faculties to get on board with the program? And how did you manage to do that? I come from the music department, and we seem to live in our own little world as musicians. I think I can bet I'm the only one from my department that is here by any show of hands. I am sure. So I know we don't really get into things. How can we overcome that in our own university?
Is it okay if I? Okay. So I just want to reflect back to you how incredibly healthy this conversation is. Right? If people feel that they can voice their concerns, that is incredibly healthy. To the academic colleague, that is an ongoing challenge. I think I listened to Ahmed Bauer recently. It's always my inspiration in so many fields, but he talked about the rise of the audit society. And I think we have to talk to each other about, and I can't comment, but I can just say similar frustrations at other institutions as well. You're not alone, but it is a challenge with what universities are confronted with in terms of reporting and what's required. Resistance to change, that's the word sustained. You cannot quit in this work. You cannot quit, and you have to know, based on all the literature, student success, you're in it for the long haul. It's very complex. Our organizational forms, the only organizational form older than universities is the church. We've been around for 1,000 years, so in terms of age, we laugh at global corporates, right? They laugh at us because of their capital, but we are very complex. So you're going to get resistance at many levels. It's difficult for people to change if they are not heard, if they're not taken along, if you don't talk to them. And that's a continuous process because we're human organizations. So the only answer I can give you is you don't stop engaging, because sometimes you get so frustrated you just don't want to talk to the colleague. But if students and institutions if colleagues collaborate and universities collaborate, students win because they get their degree. But that is very hard work.
I'd just like to add about the issue of resistance to change. If I take the Siyaphumelela program, every partner institution, the 18 that were part of it, when they join Siyaphumelela, they join on the basis they want to be partners and they ascribe to the goals of Siyaphumelela. When we talk about resistance to change, this is what happens. You get the Vice Chancellor who signs the MOU, passes it down to the DVC passes it to the director passes it to assistant director, etc. And that person then tries to implement it. That's when you get resistance to change, because there is no follow-up from the top all the way. And that's where we see most of the resistance. And the way to work around that is go back to the Vice Chancellor and say, listen, this is what you signed, this is your obligations, and we need to put that right. So that's one way of dealing with the resistance to change. Also within institutions, you'll find individuals who are very powerful in their little spaces, and they try to put roadblocks to certain changes. Then you obviously need to deal with it. It's an internal matter, and there's ways about dealing with it without being too confrontational. And more or less, you want to achieve your goals. That's more important for the benefit of the students and the institution.
Great. So there was agreement from Dr. Marinette Jordan with what Prof. Heather Brooks also said in terms of the administrative tasks. And then a question from Dr. Bradley Greenall from the Faculty of Law, who I know is already doing brilliant work in his faculty around student success and student support. He asked, to what extent has SU management engaged already with existing student support, mentoring, advising within the various spaces across campus? There is a wealth of experience, knowledge in place in many different spheres. It would surely be a significant missed opportunity for centralized policies determined in the absence of engagement with these role players. So what I answered, and Deresh, please add as well, but part of the institutional project that you mentioned and gave details of is to first do a proper analysis and a benchmarking on our own campus as to what is already in place, and then basically build on the good practices. And if there are gaps, those gaps will be filled through multiplying then the good practices that we already have on campus.
No, that's correct. I think in terms of what we're trying to build at the institution is not to do away with current good practices that we will have in particular environments or in particular spaces in the institution, but to enhance those and to do it consistently across the entire institution. So that's our approach to this. With regards to the issues around the increased administration and how that takes away from the time that you can actually use productively in terms of engaging with students, which obviously then aids in student success, I think that's also part of the discussions with academic renewal. Academic renewal is about how do we become more effective and efficient at the way we do things within the institution, which then frees up time for both students and staff to truly engage on what really matters within the institution. That's the academic endeavor.
Just a couple of things in relation to resistance to change and how to change universities. One of the things that causes resistance to change is prejudice, is not knowing what the problems are that one is dealing with, or having sort of overdeveloped ideas of how good you are. So let me give you a couple of live experience of myself. When I was at the University of the Free State, we were at one of the sessions of Achieving the Dream in America, and Sia Pumelela, the Cressy Foundation, kindly invited my future employer to come and see what we were doing there. And our colleagues, representative from UCT, thought that that was not for UCT because we don't have this kind of students. We do not have that kind of problem. Fast forward a few years, I was the DVC at UCT, and voila, there was the same problem at UCT. The point was that people were not prepared to look at it. So UCT started participating in Sia Pumelela, and now they are learning the things that other people learned 10 years before them. So with a little bit of luck and a little bit of open-mindedness, maybe we can make this university catch up with 20 years of work that we need to catch up with. It seems to me that the questions that people are asking move in that direction. It seems to me that the responses that we get from the students move in that direction. And certainly my so far short experience of what is happening in the faculties suggests that we're moving in that direction. Not everybody wants to change an institution. So one needs to understand that one moves on. There are people who are going to move on with you, and there are people who are going to be left behind. They're left behind, they're left behind. At some point they retire, at some point Doesn't matter. The point is how many people can sort of work together and do something together. And I think that there is sufficient will and knowledge at the university to do this type of thing. So the questions here are very positive, and even the moaning is very positive, because then one knows where the pain is. So I think that that's good. So thank you very, very much for that.
Liz, as you said, I think we just would be wary of time, so maybe one final question from the back.
Afternoon, I'll try to be brief. So I am actively involved in student leadership, and something that we have really noticed this particular year is that our students are not incredibly proactive. Instead, they remain in a reactive state, particularly to their academic success. So Prof Strydom, I would really like for you to unpack what you spoke about a bit more in terms of agency and those mitigating factors, because as student leaders, it's something we are grappling with, and we are kind of unsure of how to deal with that agency, and are in a point of like, please just do something, because students come to us really, really after the fact. So if you could unpack what you spoke about on mitigating factors of agency, that would be really, really nice. Thank you.
So that's actually, so firstly, you're not alone. Currently, what we are also seeing is, or it is a complaint that people say, students, where's their agency? So this is actually something that requires some very deep conversation and reflection about where you are in 2023. So what do you know about your first years, second years, and third years? How many of them had to study online at what time? Those that are coming from the school system, I don't know what percentage of your students come straight out of school. You need to look at their age. So at the moment, in my head at least, I'm trying to compute, is the lack of agency a result of overwhelm? We see a huge amount of students don't want to participate in anything that's not their academics. Now, I'm a psychologist by training. If you only do academics, the chances are excellent that you're going to fail, because there's no balance, and you are your whole identity is invested in that mark. And when that mark is not what you want it to be, your world disintegrates. So I'm very worried, and if you come, Liz will appreciate this. Some of our students we want to look at how do we create a bit more balance for our students. So I don't have an answer for you because I'm grappling with it, but it requires in your context some very deep questions about what does it feel like to be at Stellenbosch in 2023, coming out of COVID, and I did 2 years of schooling. If I come to Stellenbosch, how does the institution make me feel? If you want to hear me rant, I won't do that because we're out of time, but I have massive problems with what the media does to the matric qualifications. Because what our students overcome to make it here is phenomenal, right? I'm not saying matric is not problematic. I'm not saying we don't have secondary school challenges. But what do you do to the human being if you devalue their journey, right? So you have to have some deep conversations. Why do we think that? And then you need to look for data. As far as I understand, one of my colleagues told me that you do a lot of mental health work. What does that data tell you? So is it an artifact of overwhelm? And then you have a set of interventions that goes at that. And that's not an easy fix, but it's not unfixable, right? So that would be the 2023 answer. Historic data trends, you need to look at what has been going on. What does your qualitative data and quantitative data tell you about what it's like to be here? And then what it's like to be here for whom? Right. I want to get into it. I'm just trying to find an additional hour in the day. I'm very worried about males, right? And what the implications are for society. Because a lot of South Africa's problems, my colleagues agree with me when you talk about, are male problems. Right? So what are we going to do about that? I'm 99.5% of my staff are female. I am deeply committed to equity in that space, and all my data shows that. But what do we do about that aspect? We just say, ah, yeah, they're males. Let's not just leave them. Let's not talk to them. Have you tried talking to males recently?
Francois, Bala, thank you very much for your responses to all the various questions. I'm going to ask Dr. Liz Langer to do a bit of a summing up.
Thank you. I really don't think that we need to sum up. I think that the range of themes that have emerged are really important. I would like to rescue 2 or 3. One is that the silo mentality that characterizes higher education institutions in general is not the most conducive to address this. The second one is that any institution that wants to tackle student success at a systemic level needs to have the leadership of the institution absolutely involved. And when we say that from the Vice Chancellor to the gardener, everybody is responsible, we start with the Vice Chancellor. And that means that you put your money where you are talking about things. And I think that that's really, really important. And the third one is that we need to talk to each other, and we need to be able to understand that data, knowing how to use data, and being able to read it and being able to share it also with the students is a way of making progress in this direction. So if we manage at this university to do these 3 things, we will be making really real progress. And I think that Deresh is committed to the Siyapumelela investment. So hopefully we'll be part of that too. I think that's it, Deresh. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Liz. All I got to do now is say, first of all, thank you very much to every single one of you for making yourselves available. We know it's a cold, rainy afternoon, so you braved it to come out for this lecture or this event. And for me to thank Bala and Francois, I think it was extremely insightful. I think there's lots of lessons for us to learn as an institution in terms of what's taking place in the Siyapumelele network, as well as the great work that's been done at UFS. I told Francois that I was chatting to the Vice Chancellor recently, and they've made a significant commitment to student success as an institution. It was a council-supported initiative, and I think it's something for us to learn as an institution, because we're also looking at really making student success the highest priority at this particular institution. So great lessons that we've learned. Good to have that insight. And colleagues, thank you very much, and have a good rest of the afternoon.